Good morning. It's God morning, isn't it? Oh, that's all. Some of you have heard me speak before, most of you haven't. My brain goes to acronyms. So peace is positive energy, always creates ease. That's peace. Positive energy, not, oh, excuse me. So it's a perfect setup for that. And my talk actually, I don't know how I gave them the long talk title, or maybe I changed it after I started thinking about it. You know, the best laid plans often go astray. So what this morning is, I want to share with you exploring cause and effect. We all know about cause and effect. And before I step into my talk, I want to acknowledge that today's December 7th. It's my mother's birth date. And I'm so grateful that she was my mother. And I only remember once when I had been about maybe 5 or 6, and I kept forgetting things that I was supposed to not do or do. And finally she said, you know, Patty, Patricia Sue Clancy was my birth name. If you forget again, I may have to give you something to remember better with. And it was springtime, and the creeks were running really full in the front part of the neighbor's property, and the back part was quiet. And so I said, can I put on my suit and go swimming with my friends that were over there? She said yes. And we knew I was not supposed to be in the front creek. So we ended up in the front creek, and I went, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. So we went to the back creek. But when I got home, my mother was a mind reader. And she just went, Patty? So I got a little swap on my behind with one of the little pieces of wood on the outside of your house. Yeah, that. But I remember that was the only time I ever got that kind of a reprimand. I've got some, I think it's time for you to take a little time out kind of things. But I'm so grateful to know that, yes, there is cause and effect in life. And it showed up real clearly for me. So where my attention goes, my energy flows. Have you noticed that? If I read the paper and I look at the politics and go, I go, okay, just let's put that over there. I don't need to, there's nothing, can I do anything about it except maybe vote differently or whatever? But I don't want to put all that in my brain and just go have it chattering around. So I want to say, where my attention goes, my energy flows. I don't want my energy there. But there's a song from Sunday school that some of you may know, and it goes like this. I'm alive, aware, awake, enthusiastic. I'm alive, aware, awake, enthusiastic. I'm alive, alert, aware. I'm alive, alert, aware. I'm alive, alert, aware, enthusiastic. Well, now the first parts of it we could get, but I want to look at that word enthusiastic. In the middle of it is entheos, which says God, with God. God is our enthusiastic. So I'm going to ask us to do it once more. When we get to enthusiastic, we're going to really get the heart up here. I'm alive, awake, aware, enthusiastic. I'm alive, aware, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, aware. I'm alive, awake, aware. I'm alive, awake, aware, enthusiastic. Yeah, you're part of the choir. We'll start it. The last time I spoke, we were talking about love, that we did the acronym, some of you may remember, Living Outward Vitalizes Everything. Today's acronym is LIVE, L-I-V-E, which I'm posing as loving intentionally vitalizes everything. Live. Loving intentionally vitalizes everything. You may have remembered when we were maybe teenagers and we had, oh, there you go, yeah, I'd like to get it going with them. And then there's a whole lot of energy that gets going, doesn't it? And we're not too old to have energy that goes like that. It may be that we have different situations, but there's still that possibility. So, live is actually the opposite of evil, E-V-I-L, which could be called energy violating, interacting living. We don't want that energy that's going to be violating what's going on in our lives or somebody else's life. So we want to love intentionally and vitalize that energy. So we're just going to explore a little bit together on how we may experience more of our good desires and become aware of the time we may be blocking ourselves from that. As children, I grew up in the country, but I also went to school in town, and I learned early on the old stop, look, and listen. And that's a pretty good idea for us as adults now, too. Because if I stop and look, I can notice where I'm putting my attention, because where my attention goes, my energy flows, and the result shows. Remember? Do I really want more of that? Crap. And almost everybody has something that might be unpleasant or hurtful or challenging. We've all had some sorrows in our life. We wouldn't have gotten here without some ups and downs and some I wish it had been different situations. As children, we learn to stop, look, and listen before we cross the street. And sometimes that's a good idea in our relationships, too. Just kind of like, let me just notice what's happening here and just listen. Is there something more that it would be appropriate for me to be paying attention to? Just stop, look, and listen. And then we get to explore yes and blessings. Yes, it looks like this. It's kind of like the manure of life has appeared. Notice I said manure. or we might have stepped in it. And I have a story that I read years ago, and there were two identical twins. One was very optimistic, and the other one was, everything is always great somehow, and the other one was very pessimistic. Some of you may have heard that story about it. And the parents were concerned, the identical twins, and they were puzzled about it. And so they went to a psychiatrist or a psychologist and explained their puzzlement, because why are they're identical, And then, but they're like this. He said, well, let's do a little experiment and just see what happens. So they set up a situation where there was a room that had closed windows in it, but the people, if you were inside, you wouldn't be able to see who was on the other side of the window. So they put a big pile of manure in the middle of this room. And they put one of the twins in it. They went, just wondered what went around it. And when that appropriate, they were timing them. The time says, "Come on out." Yeah, this is about it. And the other twin went in, and he went, throwing the manure all over the place. and they're looking through this closed glass window going, what is going on? And, and so when the time was up, they came in and said, what was going on? Well, if all this manure is here, there's got to be a pony somewhere. So we get to look sometimes, so where's our pony? And just kind of get that other stuff out of the way, just okay. Because we want to stay in the place of, there's cause and effect, but we want to stay more in the loving part and the LIVE, that part of it, the power of our lives, because the acronym for LIVE could be loving intentionally vitalizes everything. So we intentionally say, you know, I've had this kind of unease with this person, whatever the name is. Let's see. If I'm in charge here, how might I make a difference in my perception, in my response? How can I approach life so I have more of the good things that I desire in the ways that maybe I'm locking myself from that and I don't even realize it? So we all stop, look, and listen, and before we cross that street, and explore our blessings. Did I mention that this is my mother's birth date? Yeah, I did mention that. Thank you. Sometimes we get to do just simple things, like just stopping for a moment and notice the tendency of our thinking. If, for example, it never works out for me, just never works out for me. Oh, I'm probably not good enough to do. And besides, I don't have enough friends, family, money, experience, training, Nobody cares about me. That kind of isn't very healthy or helpful, is it? So it's like, how can we find someone who is the listener that will be with us in our support and not just go, oh, honey, it'll be okay. A counselor, a practitioner, we have them here. If there's not somebody here, they probably can, if they're not available, they can probably direct you to someone else. And I acknowledge that I spent quite a number of times sitting with a psychiatrist when I was going through some of that stuff. And this was his response. Huh? He was always, spoke words when I went in, and pretty soon he said, and would say something like, well, tell me more about that. And then, of course, we would say goodbye, and there was verbal communication, but mostly it was simply that here was a compassionate listener. And I know as I look around this room, there are many in this room who are compassionate listeners and know that sometimes it's just, would you like to tell me more about that? and just listen. And never give advice, because my perception of what might be appropriate may or may not be the most appropriate, because I only have these eyes and ears and this brain here looking at something else. So instead of saying, oh, it never works out for me, I'm not going to, keep remembering the kids with the pony. There's got to be a pony in here somewhere. Remember the old Sunday school song, Count Your Many Blessings? Yeah. Count your many blessings, count them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. As we count our blessings, count them one by one. Then we see more clearly just what God has done. Remember it? Okay, now that you've got it, let's really sing it now. Count your many blessings, count them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. As we count our blessings, count them one by one. Then we see more clearly just what God has done. Thank you. We could start a choir. So the ponies and the other kinds of things, when there's a flood, or can we swim or grab a life raft or call a friend who can help us? Are we willing to say in this moment, please and thank you? I remember when I was living in California and I was speaking regularly, and it was a larger church, and every Sunday the message was recorded, and we had a great team, and by the time people had had coffee and so forth, there were tapes ready to go out the door. They could buy a tape to go. And I was one of all was just me as a speaker, but every once in a while I think, that was a pretty decent speech. And Asha, my daughter, wasn't there. She was somewhere else. But my son wouldn't have been interested to come to church. But I would every once in a while give him a CD. He didn't have a tape player at home, but he had one in his car. And so he hadn't said much about it. And one day I asked him, and he said, well, Mom, I really like to hear your voice. But he said, mostly when I'm in a car, I'm driving and I can't get diverted. And then when I'm not in my car, I'm working, or he was doing theater and he was busy and he was dating and blah, blah, blah. And he said, your voice puts me to sleep. And that's not safe driving. So we get to just stop, look, and listen, and keep exploring. What am I putting my attention on? Where do I want more of my attention to be going? And just experiment with it, because that's what we're doing anyway. When I first came here to Unity, it was 10 minutes from my house. And my ministry was through Church of Religious Science, because that was the one that I happened to go with when I met a lady friend that the lady that ran the school library, and I got acquainted because I was doing speech therapy. I had 2 majors, speech therapy and elementary education, which meant I had credentials that I could teach anything, kindergarten through junior high. Sure. So I did just as one semester, I think, of a classroom, but I was mostly a speech therapist. And that opportunity took me to a lot of places and a lot of situations. But I brought that up because the coincidences of that and being in a situation where I have choices, and when I was in training as a practitioner and then looking to be in the ministry, you were encouraged to, wherever possible, speak to a group. And there were study groups where there weren't enough people to have a minister there, but there would be study groups around, and there was at one time a study group up in the mountains. And there was an open invitation. I said, well, that'll be interesting. So this is how God is so cute about coincidences. So I went up there on a Saturday, and they put me up in a very nice hotel room, and we met on a Saturday, just casually, Saturday evening, and then I was to present a talk to them, because they're up in the mountains and they don't get that opportunity because they can't have a minister. And so I did a presentation, and then this part of the plan was we would have a nice lunch, and then I would go back down the mountain. So we did all this, and we were at we were at the lunch part, and we're chatting, and somebody asked me about my experiences, and I mentioned, that in this and that because of speech therapy, and that my first speech therapy job, I ended up in the Mojave Desert because I accidentally was in the education department. I'd come from Michigan to California. I needed to get out of Dodge for a while just to shift gears out of college. And so I was staying with a friend, and she said, pretty soon, she said, why don't you go over to Cal State, Southern Cal, and to their employment department, see what's going on. So I don't remember how I got there, but I did, through the city somehow. So I'm going through in the building, and I go, oh, here's the education department. I went up the elevator to there, and there are two offices with a door jamb, and both doors are open. There's a young man sitting in the one on the right, and I thought, well, I'm supposed to see this lady over here. So I sat down. There was a row of chairs over here, and I'm kind of sitting there getting a little antsy. And then in 10, 15 minutes, a nicely looking lady came in and just smiled at me and sat down a few chairs over from me. And we just nodded and smiled. And I'm getting, where's the lady I'm supposed to see about this position? So I stood up and went over, and here's the door, the space between the two open doors is there, and I just tapped lightly on it, and there was a young man sitting there, and I said, excuse me, am I in the right place? I have a speech therapy credential, and I teach kindergarten through, is this where I should be? And he said, yes, I'll be with you in just a moment. I said, thank you. And I sat down. This lady moved over and sat beside me, and she said, my name is Emmy Pendleton. I'm from Kern County Superintendent of Schools, and we just lost our speech therapist. Can I talk to you? So I ended up in the Mojave Desert because in California, if a school district is not large enough, did I tell you this story before? Some of you, some of you are going, no, and others, yeah. In California, the county has to provide a speech therapist if the school district is not large enough. So I ended up living on the Mojave Desert because there were two schools closer to the Air Force base, and then over here was a Navy base, and over here was the Navy, somebody else, an Army base, and the person that was showing me all around was showing me where these places were. Here's the candy, honey. You're single, and we need you. So, long story short, I ended up on the desert, and that's because the closest place that I could go for any activity was on the Air Force Base. That's where I met my kid's dad in a theater group, and the story unfolded. Fast forward to the time when I'm in religious science and studying, and end up in the mountains to do a workshop for a study group, and we're chatting after they've hosted me, we're having lunch and so forth, and somebody said something about Mojave, and what you did, and I said, well, I live on the Mojave Desert, and the lady down at the end of the table leaned over, and she said, when was that? And I said, she said, you took my position. I said, what? She said, yes, I had a family emergency in Michigan. I had come from Michigan. I had a family emergency in Michigan and had to leave that position. I show up in the middle of the Mojave Desert and take her position, and that's where I met my kids' dads and so on and so forth. I said, ain't God cute? If you wrote it out, they go, nah, that doesn't sound right. So thank you for sharing space and time with me, and I'm sure that you have those little, oh, that couldn't have happened times in your life too. I see a lot of nodding of heads. So I thank you so much again for being here and with me as we explore cause and effect, as well as the joys of the surprises that Spirit often has for us. Thank you. Thank you.